Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dynasty After Dark. I'm your host, Calvin Timms, and I'm excited. Round one of the draft is finally in the books, and I have taken a night to sleep it over and think through some of these prospects and their landing spots. You know, everyone's going to be out there trying to rush their analysis and everything like that. Get it to you first. I'd rather get it to you right than first, so that's why I took a little bit of time. But I'm excited to be talking about these guys with you today. And man, it was an exciting first round. It was a little less predictable, I think, than a lot of people thought. A lot of trades, but they were very interesting trades, right? The Texans coming up from 12 to go to 3, things like that. A couple teams trading back one or two spots. No trades for quarterbacks at the end of round one. I was really surprised by that. And then the biggest thing that surprised me was, with all the wide receivers falling, and we'll get to them here shortly, nobody traded for a known quantity at the wide receiver position. The Giants, for example, they ended up picking at 25 versus trading for like a Brandon Ayuk or a Jerry Jeudy or something like that, which I was shocked that there was no trades of wide receivers like last year. So maybe we'll see some things change in round two, but gotta say, just the picks alone made this draft extremely interesting. So I have the CBS draft board, or post-draft analysis, and I always find this one hilarious because it's by Pete Prisco, and I'm giving him a little bit of credit when I probably shouldn't because he's an idiot, but it's hilarious. Like, just go look at these grades. Panthers, Bryce Young, grade B- for the pick. It's like, okay, that's great. B for CJ Stroud. What does it take to get an A from this guy? You just go through this. Tyree Wilson was an A at 7. This is terrible. It is terrible. These are so dumb. But it is what it is. I just wanted to shout this out. And this is the draft board we're going to be going through here as we recap the dynasty impacts from all these players. So really quickly, we're going to start with the quarterback position. And shockingly, there was only 3 quarterbacks in the first round. Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson. Young went number 1 to the Carolina Panthers. CJ Stroud, shockingly, went number 2 to the Houston Texans. I don't think anybody expected them to make this pick when they were on the clock, to be honest with you. I think a lot of people thought they were going to take Will Anderson and then see who fell at 12 and things like that. But they went and got their guy, CJ Stroud, and I love it. I'm so high on CJ Stroud, and I think that the Texans have a lot of potential. I've heard a lot of people talking about how the Texans aren't actually that good of a roster and everything. I think they're a lot better than people give them credit for, and a good coaching staff is going to really, really bring it out in these guys. So we will see. I could be wrong here, but I think that the Texans are a lot closer than people would like to admit. They still need a wide receiver. They need an alpha dog there. Maybe they can bring back DeAndre Hopkins, but yeah, I think that they're a lot closer than people think. And then the Colts' biggest surprise here, not Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, and even Pete Prisco, if you're looking here, this should have been Will Levis. Dude, this is hilarious. Now, talking through the fantasy impacts, who would want Will Levis versus Anthony Richardson? That's what I'm talking about. This guy is interesting with his analysis here. But talking through the quarterbacks and the dynasty impacts, I still have it CJ Stroud number 1, Anthony Richardson number 2 for my dynasty rankings. I can see the argument for Richardson as number 1, but the biggest difference here is I do think that Pete Prisco here is correct. Richardson is going to take a little bit of time. He does have an amazing ceiling, but they also have Gardner Minshew to be the starter for this team for the short term. Now, I don't think that's any threat to Anthony Richardson long term. I think it just means that they are more flexible with when they can roll Anthony Richardson out there. They can let him develop a little bit more as a quarterback. I think that is a very real possibility that Anthony Richardson doesn't even play a game this year. I would be a little shocked by it, but I could also see a pretty good argument for it as well. So Anthony Richardson, I love the ceiling. I love the talent. And I think that he could be the number 1 in this draft class. But for Superflex, you are potentially waiting, 6-8 games, maybe even a whole year before you're going to be able to use him. versus CJ Stroud, who I think has a little bit of everything, right? He's not the most mobile guy, but he's more mobile than people give him credit for. And he's just such a good quarterback. He's going to be so good for fantasy football. Then you got Bryce Young. He's going to still be my number 3 guy here, but he's small. And, the fact that he went to the Panthers doesn't really help the situation very much. Panthers right now, they don't really have any weapons. They've got DJ Chark, who I love, Adam Thielen. I mean, way past his prime, Adam Thielen is not going to really do much for Bryce Young. Their offensive line is getting better, but it's still not very good. They need an interior for the offensive line pretty badly, and they don't really have many picks left. They gave up a lot to go from 9-1 to get Bryce Young, and I just don't think that there's enough around Bryce Young for fantasy purposes to be a good selection. I think he's a safe selection. I think he has a very high floor, but you're talking a quarterback 2 basically his entire career. I don't think he ever has a quarterback 1 season. He would be the outlier of outliers, first off, physically. And if you trust him enough to play him on the field, which obviously the Panthers do, trust him enough to draft him number 1. But for fantasy football, dude, there's no way that he's going to be able to finish he's not Kirk Cousins. And Kirk Cousins, barely top 12. And you're telling me that Bryce Young is going to have a career better than Kirk Cousins? Oh, man, I just don't see it, not at that size. So he's still going to be my number 3 guy, definitely a tier down between these next 2 guys. I think it's more notable, however, that Will Levis wasn't even a first-round pick. He fell out of the first round, which was shocking. They kept cutting to him in the draft room the entire night. I felt a little bad for him because it's not his fault that he's getting all this hype and pressure to be in a first-round pick, a top 5, NFL pick. And the fact that he fell out of it, man, I do feel bad for the human of Will Levis. I don't think he's a good quarterback. I never thought he should have been in the first-round conversation in the first place, but it's not his fault that people hyped him up to the levels that they were. And the fact that he fell out of the first round completely, it's going to be interesting. Tonight we're going to find out where he ultimately goes, but there's a few quarterback needy teams right at the top of the draft. It could still be the Raiders, for example, and they get him in the second versus the first. Now, Will Levis, he has potential long term. I don't want that to get lost in this, but the biggest thing for this is I think it does create a little bit of a value for Will Levis in your Superflex drafts. He's probably going to fall to round 2 now, and that's where I'm interested, at least, in taking a shot at Will Levis. I don't love it. There's a lot of red flags there with Will Levis, but, we'll see who goes first, him or Hendon Hooker. They kept talking about these guys nonstop. So that's the quarterback position. Hendon Hooker also was not a first-round pick. He was kind of hit or miss. A lot of people thought he should be. A lot of people thought he shouldn't be, but everyone thought Will Levis was going to be a top 10 pick. So that's kind of why there's a big difference there. Hendon Hooker, I still like him. I like the talent of him more than Will Levis. I think that there's a lot of potential there. He's the most accurate, possibly, of all these quarterbacks. He only has 2 interceptions in the last 2 years. It's crazy. He did not turn the ball over at all. Sign me up for him on the Lions, for example, early in the second round here. Gets to sit behind Goff and gets to recover, or Seattle, for example. I think there's a lot of potential for Hendon Hooker with these early teams. Will Levis also could go to one of those teams and see where he lands and winds up. So quarterback position, I still believe that Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, if I was the 101, I'd be taking, man, if you need a quarterback, you have to go quarterback. But Bijan, ooh, baby, it actually happened. So we're going to transition there over to the running back position. And, man, this was a shocker. It was a shocker. Bijan Robinson goes to the Falcons, and Pete Briscoe here is not a big fan of that. I love it, but, it is wild because the Falcons have now taken Kyle Pitts at number 4, Drake London at number 8, and Bijan Robinson at number 8 in 3 straight seasons. And they're still being manned by Desmond Ridder. There was the option to take someone like a Will Levis here, and they chose not to do it. We'll see if they grab a Hendon Hooker or Will Levis in round 2. I honestly think that Will Levis could be a very good candidate for them to take in round 2. And then you have some competition, Desmond Ridder or Will Levis. If one of these two guys pans out, well, then you're set and you don't have to worry about it next year. But man, Bijan Robinson in that Arthur Smith offense, oh my goodness. Now, really quickly, we're going to talk about the fallout. Cordero Patterson and Tyler Algier, harder's hit here, but here's the thing. I don't think any team is going to give Bijan Robinson 80% of the snaps. No teams in the NFL still do that. So I still think that there's a little bit of potential for Tyler Algier, but it's definitely as a handcuff now, and it's going to be much more muted versus what it was in the past. So, the 1,000 yards that he was able to get last year as a rookie, that's great and all. I was hoping that he would be able to maintain that job, but I think Arthur Smith is going to still give him a decent amount of workload, 30% of the snap share, but it's just not really going to be much for fantasy football, which, again, pour one out for Tyler Algier. Hopefully you were able to sell him before the NFL draft, but if you don't, hanging on to him is not a bad option as well, just because he's now Bijan Robinson's number one handcuff. Cordero Patterson is like 33 years old. I'm not really that interested in the first place, so I always thought he was kind of a trap there. So the other running back that went in the first round, this one was a mega shocker. Like, I did not see this one coming at all. You can let me know on Twitter, on YouTube, if you had any inkling that they were going to do this. But Jahmyr Gibbs, number 12 to the Detroit Lions. Man, my words, it's early. That's why I need my coffee here, right? Jahmyr Gibbs, man, they just signed David Montgomery. There's a lot of reports that came out last night that they have been shopping DeAndre Swift. They expect to move him here in the next couple of days. And what a fall from grace. You watch the reaction video of these guys when they selected Jahmyr Gibbs, and it's like they won the lottery. It is crazy. Now, this was their first pick. They traded back from 6 to 12 with, I think it was the Arizona Cardinals, right? Who traded back from 3 to 12 and then traded back up. But Jahmyr Gibbs being the number one pick they took him over Christian Gonzalez, some of these other guys, Lucas Van Ness. They had a lot of options that they could have taken over someone like a Jahmyr Gibbs. So the fact that they took a running back here when they just signed David Montgomery, they still had DeAndre Swift. It was unexpected, to say the least. And additionally, they had the number 18 pick. They could have just taken him at that pick. I don't think the Packers, the Steelers/Patriots, whoever it was, the Jets, the Commanders, any of these guys would have taken the running back of Jahmyr Gibbs in that time frame. So the fact that they took him here at 12, I didn't like the pick, but for fantasy football, man alive, he is DeAndre Swift, like he is a prolific pass catcher. Jared Goff likes to dump it off to the running backs. I think him and David Montgomery are going to have a yin and yang type of style together. Jahmyr Gibbs is not the biggest guy. I think he's only like 200 pounds, 199. So there's a real possibility that David Montgomery is going to be the workhorse goal line guy. And Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be more of a change of pace guy to start the season. But man, I love this landing spot. And with this coaching staff who knows how to dump it off to these guys, I think there's a lot of potential here for Jahmyr Gibbs. Great offensive line in Detroit. So, he's going to be set up for success pretty early on. Now, David Montgomery himself, I think that this is a big buff for him as well. And if they get rid of DeAndre Swift, this is all predicated on them moving on from DeAndre Swift, which everyone kind of expects. Based on what they were saying about DeAndre Swift last year, this is kind of expected. They just do not really like DeAndre Swift for whatever reason. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of smoke around them moving on from DeAndre Swift. And if they do move on from him, David Montgomery, I think he's going to be an RB2 with a pretty safe floor. And then Jahmyr Gibbs is also going to be an RB2 with a pretty safe floor as well due to the pass catching. So again, yin and yang type of guys. They do kind of feast off each other a little bit here. You're not going to be able to rely on them for, top 5 numbers, but I think it could be a lot worse. And Jahmyr Gibbs, I was hoping for him to be able to, maybe go to Cincinnati later on in the draft, but yeah, this was a little bit of a shocker. Now my fingers are crossed for Kendre Miller going to the Cincinnati Bengals in round 2. That'd be so much fun. So yeah, only two running backs. Two running backs was a little bit unexpected, I would say. Everyone expected Bijan in the first round. Jahmyr Gibbs, though, going at 12, man. A lot of people didn't think Bijan would be going before 12. And yeah, the fact that they got Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan top 12, crazy, 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 crazy. All right, switching over to the wide receivers now. This was interesting because they had four straight wide receivers go in the first round here. And if you're watching on YouTube, thank you guys so much for joining us here. I got the draft board, Pete Prisco's draft board up here, so you can see them all. It's kind of convenient, I don't have to scroll through. I can just show you all 4 of them because they're all back to back to back. And it's hilarious. Again, this is just the funniest thing. Jackson Smith-Njigba to the Seahawks, grade B. Quentin Johnston to the Chargers, grade C. Zay Flowers to the Ravens, grade B. Jordan Addison to the Vikings, grade A. It's like, dude, your grades are so biased. It's so dumb. Oh, it's just funny to me. It's just so, people are so ridiculous with their biases, right? Now, that said, JSN to the Seahawks. For fantasy, I don't think this is good. I do not think this is good. For year 1, it's going to be not great for JSN. And Tyler Lockett is getting older. He can't really stay healthy full time, but this is just not a high volume passing attack with Pete Carroll and with JSN being the number 3 option in this offense. There's just not going to be enough to go around. Long term, you're buying into the talent of JSN. I think he's the best talent in this class by far, but he's going to be playing slot only, and I just don't really see them in 2 wide receiver sets, which Seattle does a lot. It's going to be Metcalf and Lockett. So the opportunities for JSN is going to be very limited in year 1. Long term, though, I think he's going to be just fine. So don't let that scare you. But if you are looking for JSN to save you in year 1, I'm not holding my breath there. Honestly, of all 4 of these guys, the one that would save you in year 1 the most would probably be Jordan Addison with the Vikings. We'll get to him in 1 second, though. Quentin Johnston, though, on the other hand, this one, man, it was kind of funny to me because Quentin Johnston to the Chargers and then Zay Flowers right after them to the Ravens. I was on a podcast last night, doing a live coverage of the draft with Let's Talk Sports. Great group of guys over there. Go give them a follow. Always a good time with those guys. But we were talking on there, and someone threw out the option of just switching these 2 players. Quentin Johnston to the Ravens, Zay Flowers to the Chargers. And it made so much more sense. It would have been so much better. The problem with Quentin Johnston with the Chargers is he plays the same role as Mike Williams. Now, Mike Williams can't stay healthy to save his life, but even still, you got Mike Williams, and let's say he takes over the role for Josh Palmer, right? Well, all of a sudden, you got Quentin Johnston and Mike Williams on the outside. That means Keenan's going to the slot full time, which is kind of odd to me. And, if you know anything about the new OC, Kellen Moore's offense, they utilize the player that's in the slot the most. Like for fantasy production, I think Keenan Allen is going to be an absolute killer this upcoming season for fantasy football. But yeah, Quentin Johnston, man, I just don't love the opportunity. Again, with JSN, early, short term. But, maybe if Mike Williams gets injured, probably when Mike Williams gets injured again, there's a lot of opportunity there for Quentin Johnston. He's a lot faster than Mike Williams. Mike Williams is a little bit bigger, I think, size-wise. But, yeah, I think this one was an interesting one. I like the combination with Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert has one of the best deep balls in the league. I think that he's very, very good at it. But I just don't think the opportunity, again, just like with JSN, in year 1 at least, is going to be very high for Quentin Johnston. Long term, though, I think that this is a great combination. And he's got 2 really good teachers to learn from with this offense, right? So I do like it long term. But again, short term, it's not the greatest. Now that leads to Zay Flowers with the Ravens. And again, if you just swap these two guys, I think it's a much better fit for both of them. I think the opportunity goes up for both of them as well. But Zay Flowers to the Ravens, I don't love this. And I talked about this last night as well on the podcast is Lamar Jackson accurate enough to utilize someone like a Zay Flowers? I don't know. They still have Rashad Bateman. They brought in Odell Beckham Jr., and Zay Flowers is going to be playing primarily slot. Now, they have Todd Monken, so it's going to be a new offense for this entire team. But Zay Flowers is just a really shifty player. Like, that is his calling card. He's extremely shifty, very good route runner, and he would be paired best with a very accurate quarterback. I don't know if that is Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, throughout his entire career so far, he likes to target those guys in the middle of the field, which I think Zay Flowers could probably eat up that a little bit more. But I don't know. I think this helps the team more than it helps the fantasy production of Zay Flowers. The fact that he was the number 3 wide receiver, though, there's big props there to him. I'm not a big fan of this personally. I could be wrong. I just don't know for Dynasty how good this is going to be. Now, let's say Odell is pretty old. So let's say that he's out after this year. They move on from Rashad Bateman. All of a sudden, Zay Flowers is the number 1 guy. They signed Lamar Jackson to a long-term contract right before the draft yesterday. So there's that piece of news right there. But that could be a good combination. I just need to see this on the field before I'm willing to, really buy into it from a fantasy perspective. Now, Jordan Addison, again, I talked about him. He might be the best early contributor out of all these guys. Jordan Addison goes to the Vikings at 23. And as Pete Prisco says here, he is a perfect complement to Justin Jefferson. And when you pair that speed with someone like a Kirk Cousins, he's going to be able to utilize it. And Adam Thielen, we talked about him a little bit with Bryce Young earlier. He was a shell of himself. He's not the same Adam Thielen that we've had for the last couple of years. Kirk Cousins is more than capable of facilitating multiple top 12 wide receivers. Jordan Addison, if you go back to Kirk Cousins with the Redskins at the time, and he was able to feed with Pierre Garçon and Deshaun Jackson, right? And Jordan Addison has a little bit of Deshaun Jackson in his game. He's a little bit bigger, a little bit slower, but I think that Kirk Cousins is probably the most accurate deep ball passer in the NFL. Like, I love Justin Herbert and his ability, but Kirk Cousins, every year, he's the highest percent completion rate on the deep ball, like 20 plus yards down the field. Dude just throws a really, really good ball down the field. And I think Jordan Addison is going to be able to utilize that like crazy. You've got Justin Jefferson, who's going to be playing all over the field. He's playing short, intermediate, and deep. Jordan Addison's going to be more of an intermediate and deep player for this offense, because then you got Hockenson, who's going to be playing short and intermediate as well. And yeah, I just think that it's a perfect combination. It's the perfect wide receiver to take in round 1 here for the Vikings. I love it. It helps their offense. Their offense was already good, and the defense was a little bit in shambles. A lot of people expected them to take a defensive player, but I don't think one defensive player helps fix that defense, whereas the offense is already clicking. Let's just keep it going and lean into the strength of the Vikings right now. So in terms of rankings for these guys, talent-wise, I probably still have JSN and Quentin Johnson 1 and 2 in my rankings, followed shortly by Jordan Addison at number 3 here. But if I'm drafting in year 1, I think I'm taking Jordan Addison number 1. I think that the gap between Jordan Addison and JSN in terms of talent is small enough where the opportunity cost overrides for JSN to push him down to number 2 for me. I'd be taking Jordan Addison. I get it, he's smaller, but man, the dude is very, very good. And you pair him with someone like Kirk Cousins, I love that. And there's a lot of talk about, Kirk Cousins is going to be gone. They have to draft a wide receiver or a quarterback to replace Kirk Cousins, or they can just re-sign Kirk Cousins. He's really good for this offense. Like, maybe he takes a pay cut and just stays around. Everyone just continues to hate on Kirk Cousins, and I just don't understand it. But it is what it is. So Jordan Addison, I believe in him. He's going to be my wide receiver one, I think, for Dynasty in this upcoming draft, the one that I'd be willing to take first out of all these guys. Quentin Johnson, JSN, I'd still love those guys in the first round. Again, I'm just not expecting a lot from them in year one. Zay Flowers, he's going to be overdrafted in all your leagues, and I just don't really see much fantasy value for him for the foreseeable future, to be honest with you. Like, I think Rashad Bateman's a better wide receiver than him. He's bigger than him. He fits the Lamar Jackson style a lot better than a Zay Flowers does. And, even a Todd Monken offense, I think that Bateman's going to be the number one for this team. So drafting the number 2, 3 option for this team, probably number 4 when you include Odell Beckham Jr. You got Mark Andrews number 1, Bateman number 2. OBJ's going to be the number 3 while he's there. I just don't really love drafting that in the first round, so let other people take him. That's my stance on him. Now, lastly, we're going to jump into the only tight end that went in round 1. The Bills traded up in front of the Cowboys. I don't know if there's a lot of talk about this being a snipe, a steal away from the Cowboys to go get Dalton Kincaid. But Dalton Kincaid only had, man, I just do not understand this. Pete Prisco hits on it pretty well, but right now he's got a back injury. He hasn't even been cleared yet. And the Bills have Dawson Knox. And I just don't really see the value of this for fantasy football. I know everyone loves Dalton Kincaid. He was my number 2 guy, or number 3, I think, behind Washington. Dude, he played a small conference, Utah. We talked about this with our tight end review show months ago, right? He played for Utah. He's a very good athlete, but again, you're playing against nobodies, and when you're showing off, it's like a middle schooler beating up on elementary kids in football. He's just, if he would have played in the SEC and we could see what he had there, then I'd be a little bit more of a believer. But, Dalton Kincaid, he was very hit or miss with his production, had a few injury concerns in college, and everyone shot him up their boards to be the number 1 tight end. Now he goes to the Buffalo Bills, and he's going to be so overdrafted. It's going to be insane. This team still has Stephon Diggs. They have Gabe Davis, and the team still believes in Gabe Davis. You might not believe in Gabe Davis, but the team still does. They also have James Cook. They brought in Damian Harris, and they have Dawson Knox. Like, I just don't really see the volume for Dalton Kincaid to be a valuable fantasy contributor. The fact that they jumped the Cowboys means that they wanted to take him away from the Cowboys, essentially. But, man, I don't love it. I'm not going to lie to you. I just don't really love it. And, yeah, like Pete Prisco says here, this is a strange pick, and I don't see the fantasy value for it. I still will probably have other guys ahead of Dalton Kincaid. I think I'm still probably going to end up with Michael Mayer and Darnell Washington, even though they're second-round picks. I don't really care that much because the Bills, it's just not a great fantasy landing spot unless you're the number 1 guy or Josh Allen. And, maybe Dalton Kincaid can become a number 2, but one, he's a rookie tight end. Everyone's talking about him playing in the slot, but man, I just don't really see it. The team loves the young guy that they had playing last year, Isaiah McKenzie. I think he's still there. I'm not a big fan of this pick, so I am not jumping him to the number 1. You're going to see a lot of people put him as the number 1 tight end now, and you got to take him in the first round, especially in premium leagues. And again, this is a trap pick that I'm letting other people fall on that grenade. So that's my opinion. I could be wrong. We'll recap this in about a year and see if I was right or not. But yeah, Dalton Kincaid, not in love with that pick there. So that's all the players in round 1. I was a little shocked that Michael Mayer and Darnell Washington weren't first-round picks, but I have a feeling that we're going to see, again, there was only 31 picks in the first round this year. So because of the Dolphins colluding for Sean Payton and Tom Brady and everything, there was one less pick, so it's possible. But the fact that the Bengals, for example, didn't take Michael Mayer was a little shocking. A lot of people wanted to see the Chiefs take Michael Mayer as the backup replacement for Travis Kelce long term. The fact that they took Felix Enudike Uzama was a little surprising. But yeah, it's a lot of teams that we thought were going to go offensive players ended up not going offensive players. So we'll see what they do early in round 2. And yeah, that'll be a fun one. Again, I really enjoyed this round 1 of the draft. There wasn't a lot of player trades, which surprised me. It shocked me a little bit, but I think we can see a lot more of those here tonight. So let me know your thoughts over on Twitter at TDC_Calvin. You can hit me up on YouTube. Leave a comment down below. If you can, while you're there, leave a like, subscription, whatever it is. Trying to get the podcast out to more people. But yeah, again, trying to not be the most reactionary with my analysis of these players, right? A lot of people, the draft finished 5 minutes ago, so we're going to put out a video breaking down all these things, and they haven't even really thought about the implications of it. So, trying to give a little bit more thought and insight into it. Round 2 and 3 will be recapped tomorrow. I'll be putting that out tomorrow morning. So if you guys like this one, make sure you guys come back tomorrow, and I will be updating you guys with another one. And then Dale will be back next week. We're going to be giving our finalized post-draft rankings on these guys, how the draft will impact all the players across the board. And yeah, that'll be a fun time next week. And we're probably going to do a mock draft as well this upcoming week, rookie draft. So again, thank you guys so much for joining us. And until next time, have a good night.